So, you are both a Conservative and a supporter of Brexit. What's your response to those who say that Brexit is an unconservative project? They say it's utopian, it's immoderate, and so on.
Oh gosh. I never saw it as a project. I mean, the fact is we were given... Let me go back to the beginning. What I really think is that the then Prime Minister, David Cameron, should not have given us the chance of a referendum if he did not intend to go through with the result. I think that was a major constitutional betrayal, and I suspect that most people feel that, and that he, having got the result he didn't want, he walked away at the very moment when the country needed leadership, not just leadership from a specific political party, but from the Prime Minister who had initiated this. So, given the opportunity to vote, I voted for Brexit because I've never approved really of the European Union. I've never approved of it because of its attempts to confiscate national sovereignty in all the issues that matter. To me, that is, a derogation from real politics. And that's not to say that I don't see all the absolute necessity of a trans-European system of cooperation, and I think everybody agrees with that. But I think it had the wrong form, and all attempts to reform it seem to get nowhere. So my view was we should withdraw and then work for a new treaty. But it didn't turn out that way, obviously, because the vote, the referendum, was not really respected by Parliament. And that's understandable, because we don't have a referendum, we don't have a direct democracy. We don't really believe in referenda in Britain. We assume that we have a representative democracy and that Parliament will take decisions on our behalf. So that Parliament, having been landed with a decision that it itself did not make, then decides to undo it, essentially. That's the situation we're in. So, I mean, where we are now is not a happy place. But it doesn't follow from that it was, if Cameron had said, having received the vote, that okay, I understand what you're saying, I'll now lead you in the direction which I myself would not have chosen, there would have been a completely different scenario now. He might have had the courage to go for a no-deal Brexit. At least he would have been able to say, I come to you, the Europeans, with a particular decision that my people have made, and I have no choice but to enact it. And I think that it would have gone through, something would have gone through, not necessarily a deal. I don't think you can have a deal with an institution that consists of 28 members. How can you get them all to agree to it?
Yes.
Anyway, that's my position. Does that make it?
Yes, that makes sense.
Okay.
Obviously, one of the great obstacles to getting a deal on leaving has been the Irish question, specifically that on the Irish border. What's your view on how that could have been resolved?
Well, I think it is a difficult question because the opening of that border went with a long and difficult process of reconciliation between communities that have been at each other's throats for 300 years, and to risk undoing that was impossible. So I think we were trying to keep the border open while respecting Ireland's desire to remain in the Union and our desire to withdraw from it. But the European Union does not have a concept of national identity. It was set up to abolish that idea. not to abolish German national identity, because that was trying to save itself, but it doesn't recognise the absolute value to the people of Northern Ireland of being part of this kingdom. For them that's a negotiable thing. It's not negotiable for the Northern Irish. So I think that's the source of the problem. My hope has been that kind of deeply engendered history of conflict between the Northern and the Southern Irish has, to a great extent, not been forgotten, but been conciliated in some way, that perhaps people don't now want immediately to return to the polarised situation that we had. It's hard to know, but it's when the Troubles occurred, Southern Ireland still was that strange entity described in Ulysses, which I'm still rereading, a deeply Catholic country, in which divorce was impossible and abortion and all that. It hadn't moved with the modern world. It wasn't the country which now has a Taoiseach who is a Hindu immigrant and a homosexual, who has brought about all these extraordinary changes. Not saying that those changes are necessarily right, but Ireland has jumped forward into the modern world in a way which I'm sure many of the Irish people themselves regret, but nevertheless it's not that thing, that romantic thing that was so yearned for by the IRA. So could it be that that this old conflict is now dwindling and disappearing? I don't know.
Do you still favour English independence?
No, I don't think I've ever really favoured English independence. No, my view is if the Scots want to be independent, then we should aim for the same thing. Scottish independence, I don't think the Welsh want independence. The Northern Irish certainly don't.
Yeah.
The Scottish desire for independence is to some extent a fabrication. I mean, they want to identify themselves as Scots, but still to be part of the, or to enjoy the subsidy that they get from being part of the kingdom. I can see there are Scottish nationalists who envisage something more than that. But if that becomes a real political force, then yeah, we should try for independence from them too. I mean, as it is, as you know, the Scots have two votes. They can vote for their own parliament and vote to put the people into our parliament, who come to our parliament with no interest in Scotland, but an interest in bullying us.
So you'd favour an English parliament?
Well, I think, yeah, it's sort of very odd that there isn't such a thing. My only worry is if there were such a thing, it would be a new building just as horrible as the Scottish Parliament in Edinburgh.
On the economy, there's always been a conservative critique of the free market.
Yes.
And it's increasingly said, not just by some on the left, but by some on the right, that capitalism is no longer working for the majority, and that free market economics has proved to be inherently unconservative. Do you agree with that?
Well, I've never been a sort of ardent free marketeer, although I am sceptical of state involvement in the economy, and I think most people are these days. Capitalism, it's a word, what we have today is so different from what was originally described as that by Marx and people like that. It's no longer the capitalist class of property owners and the propertyless workers who are forced to sell their labour or anything like that. Most big firms now are collectively owned by their own members. they're not as cooperatives, but as something like that, as shareholders. There is the big guy at the top, the founding person perhaps, but so many of them are not like that. These are kind of sovereign entities, and they accumulate huge sums in profits, and which do enable them to take actions which are not necessarily don't necessarily contribute to the public good. So I don't know. I'm of the view that the free market is a necessary institution. It simply is what people do when they try to make ends meet. But that when things get too big, and when they try to transcend tax boundaries and other boundaries which are necessary for the control of ordinary human behaviour, then they have to be themselves cut down to size. And I think that's where we need national sovereignty. I think it is outrageous that Amazon doesn't pay any tax in this country, or hardly any at all, that it operates from Luxembourg, which is a tin pot little place which seems to be getting more and more power over us over the years. But I think one could have done, a lot more could have been done to discipline international business in this way.
Have you been surprised by the revival of socialists, both here and in the US?
Yes, although in the end I'm not really surprised, because the decline of education means that people don't understand anymore what it was. They haven't got the historical narrative that will tell you exactly why communism leads to the Gulag, even though the evidence is still with us, with China and the rest. And they don't really know quite what socialism meant. But people will always go on believing that the present disposition of property in the world is unjust, and that the people who don't have things ought to have them, and the people who do have too much ought not to have it. That's deep in the human condition to think that. But it's a pure fantasy to think that socialism will rectify that. It never did.
Are there any of the individual policies that you think have merit on renationalisation of the public utilities, or higher tax for top earners? What's your view on those?
I do think, well, obviously as a railway user, I get tempted with the idea of renationalising the railways, partly because they seem to run quite well in places where they're nationalised, although it gives huge powers of strike action to people, which cripples France every now and then. I'm not really in favour of nationalisation, nor high rates of taxation, because all that does is send the people whom you most want to be in the country and spending their money elsewhere, as happened with all those, 300,000 wealthy French people living in London. So I think these are unreal solutions. No, I think there are elements much more important in the socialist legacy, to my way of thinking, is the proper provisions both to look after the poor and the disadvantaged, and also to give them some way into society, so that they're not just dependents. That's what socialism should really be thinking about. And unfortunately, because of the momentum movement has invaded the Labour Party and stopped it thinking about those things, turned it more in the direction of the absolute power over everything.
What's your view on the question of tuition fees?
To be quite honest, I have two views really. One is that university education incredibly cheap for what it is, or what it claims to be. And the second view is that it's incredibly expensive, given that the universities don't teach anything anymore. But if they were doing what they did, 9,000 or 10,000 a year or whatever it is nothing. And well, I have 2 children at university, so I have a few thoughts about it. But they are actually working hard, my 2, and getting an awful lot out of it. So I think it's money incredibly well spent. Most people would spend that on a holiday.
Yes, of course, you're trying to fill the voids that some universities have left with your summer schools, Scrutopia.
No, that's right, because I have a specific worldview which people do want to learn about, and so it's not easy to teach it through a university. Well, I have a position in. I teach an MA for Buckingham, but Buckingham is a sort of free university, rather outside the system. That's a pure business deal.
Evelyn Waugh once said that the problem with the Conservative Party is that it's never put the clock back by a minute.
Yes.
Do you agree with that?
Well, I think that's his romanticism. Of course, it's true. Yeah, but it's not entirely true. There are things. What the word conservative means is not putting things back, but conserving them. There are things that are threatened, and you love them, so you want to keep them. That I think that in that sense, the Conservative Party has been conservative, and certainly in comparison with the Labour Party.
Do you think there are some institutions, some traditions, which it hasn't conserved enough when it should have done?
It's hard. I think. There is the interesting case of David Cameron and gay marriage. Obviously, he made a big decision that he was going to preempt that whole discussion and go straight into the gay marriage agenda, which was, in many ways admirable, because it stopped the whole thing becoming the issue, as it might have been for 2 years. But most Conservatives would have said, well, look, isn't marriage one of the institutions that we ought to be sustaining as it in its proper nature, etc. So there was an occasion where there was a genuine Conservative issue at stake, where the Conservative Party essentially took the other line. Whether it was right or wrong is another matter, because it's such a complex issue now.
But on homosexuality, you've been criticised by some for saying, for instance, homosexuality is not normal, but that seems to be a statement of fact rather than...
I wrote a book about sexual desire it was 30 years ago nearly. It stayed in print because it's the only philosophical attempt really to say what it all is about. But in that book, I say a lot of things about homosexuality, none of which could be conceived as, what is now called homophobic. It was, I actually argue that it's not a perversion, and so on, but that it's different, and say a lot of things about why it's different. And then people take little sentences out of context. This sort of BuzzFeed, the learned editors of BuzzFeed, who have their view of on all these things, put together a kind of patchwork of offences without bothering to examine arguments or anything like that. And so you get caricatured as a particular kind of thing, as though you were somebody who wants to stone homosexuals to death or something, just because you said that it's different. Now, my own view is, don't go there, don't get involved in that kind of conversation, because these are people who don't understand ideas. There's no point in it. They themselves aren't in it for the ideas, they're in it to take revenge on the world.
In terms of policy, would you rather gay marriage hadn't been introduced?
I'm not sure. I think we can't claim that the English or British society at the time it was introduced was a great exemplar for the maintenance of the old marital idea. Almost everybody is divorced and children abandoned and all that kind of thing. So it might, but still, I do take a sacramental view of marriage, and I think that on that view, the state can't legitimise marriage anyway. So let it say call what it wants marriage. It doesn't matter.
And where do you stand on the other reforms we've seen in the area of homosexuality, things like the repeal of Section 28, and was that right?
That was from the Sexual Offences Act.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, well that's history.
Yeah.
And that was, one must remember the Sexual Offences Act was very late in the day that homosexuality was not an offence for most of the 19th century. Sodomy was, but that was regarded as a physical degradation. It wasn't to do with the sexuality, the sex of the partners. No, it was a late 19th century thing all over Europe to criminalise homosexuality, and I think it's the 1968, was it, the Act, or 64, I think.
Yeah.
Sexual Offences Act, which liberalised everything, was simply a return to how things were. And that's, in my view, how it should be.
With Section 28, that was on measures preventing schools from promoting homosexuality as an acceptable lifestyle.
Yeah, I don't like the idea of preaching homosexuality as a lifestyle in schools, because for a start it isn't a lifestyle, it's something that it's a desire that some people have, and you're introducing children to something at an age when they can't possibly understand it. But I've never been in favour of sex education as it has evolved anyway, because I think it's always done with a kind of prurience and an awakening of children to that which they perhaps don't want to be awakened to by a person who hasn't got the right to do it. I think parents have to do this, and children themselves. There's the old explorations that we all made,
Yeah. Of course, the subject which is increasingly coming up now is the debate around transgender.
Yeah.
How should that be handled in your view?
Well, a lot of this is due to displaying in front of children all these complexities that adults have about their sexual identity, and children pick it up and begin to wonder in a strange way, am I a girl or am I a boy? And then this creates all kinds of traumas in children, and of course there is the possibility that it leads to this systematic identification with a particular sex which is not the one that your body exemplifies. That I think we're playing with fire in allowing children and their parents then to say, okay, so he's really a girl, and I'm going to give him this freedom to be a girl. What happens when, after all the mutilation and the hormones and everything, you discover that he's not at ease in that new body he's been given? Can you give him back the old one? That we're playing with something which we don't understand at all. It's not to say that there aren't difficulties, but why has this come to the fore now? Why has it become the issue of the day when it hasn't been an issue like that for the previous 100,000 years of mankind? It's obviously a kind of theatrical obsession which is being imposed upon children, whether or not they understand it.
To return to conservatism for a while, Margaret Thatcher said to have remarked to the Conservative Philosophy Group, the other side have got an ideology, they can test their policies against we must have one as well. Do you agree with that?
Well, not really, no.
Yeah.
I think conservatism is not about ideology, it's about love. It's, we have something, this country and its institutions and our way of being, and that's what we're holding on to. We don't know why, but it's all that we've been given, so why not?
How do you feel about the legacy of Thatcherism?
Well, she was... I'm totally in favour of what she did, which was to shake things up and release the grip of the unions around the throat of the country. Essentially give people pride in setting themselves up in life and taking responsibility for their own being. I think all that was good, and she had a genuine streak of patriotism. Obviously, that she was, in lots of ways narrow, and she had the shopkeeper mentality. She wasn't the kind of sophisticated, super cultivated conservative that one might have hoped for. But in politics, the choice is pretty limited.
You've described quite vividly how May '68 in France was a pivotal moment in your intellectual formation.
Yeah. Well, that's indeed. I was woken up then. I wasn't really political until that moment, and I just thought I can't cope with all this stuff because I thought, here is the most beautiful city in the world, this wonderful culture, all the things that I've just learned to appreciate, and these wretched, spoiled brats are trying to pull it all down and smashing windows and burning cars which don't belong to them. I had sort of old-fashioned English puritanical revolt against it, but but it also was interesting. Tremendously interesting to read the stuff that inspired them. That's what made me first read Foucault. And recognise both the brilliance of the man and the completely demonic nature of what he was saying.
So you shared, in a sense, the horror that Edmund Burke felt at the French Revolution.
Except that, May '68 didn't involve cutting off heads and all the rest. But yeah,
some may say that's a sign of progress.
Well, yes, it was, and it was also a sign of the unseriousness of the students involved. They didn't do the real thing. The real revolutionaries round up the other side and shoot them.
Yes. Do you believe in progress?
Well, things change. Some things get better, other things get worse. But obviously in science, there is progress. And in law there is progress too, because there's a process of reasoning which gradually adapts and changes social institutions without oppressing them, and I think that's all very positive.
Who are your main intellectual and political influences in your early years?
Well, intellectually, I suppose it has nothing to do with politics. Wittgenstein and Kant have been the two great influences. In politics, though, Hegel has been a huge influence, and Burke as well, and T.S. Eliot, I think. Not exactly politics, but that's my vision of culture, it's definitely. And that's from school days, I came across 4 quartets at age 16, and that made sense of everything for the first time.
Why was Hegel so crucial?
Well, the whole vision of civil society as something independent of the state, and the individual as realised in institutions, made real through the institution, through belonging to things. That to me is very important. The anti-individualist side of Hegel, insisting that we are free, but we become free only through social membership. That's the crucial issue for me.
Would you see Hobbes as too statist?
Well, he's very. I don't know. I guess his raw realism about the human condition doesn't appeal very much to me. I think he's a brilliant writer, but he has not been a huge influence. Where were you educated then?
Warwick University.
In politics?
Yeah, history and politics.
Oh, right.
I did philosophy at A level.
Yeah. Well, Warwick is good on all that.
Were you surprised by some of the outrage you mentioned earlier over your appointment to the Building Better Commission?
Well, yes. It was very artificial in that it didn't have anything to do with building or.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean it's there's nothing you can do about that sort of thing. I was amazed about that somebody has been collecting all these tiny remarks out of context over what looked like 50 years in a hope that the opportunity one day would arise to denounce this character. And I didn't read all this stuff. I just, I thought, well, these are not people that life is too short to deal with this kind of thing. So, but it was upsetting because it, of course, it's meant to undermine your authority, and authority is the only thing I have. It's an authority that comes from hard work and thinking, and if you lose that, you've got no position in the world, because I'm not employed by anything. Or
yes.
So that was a bit of a blow. But what surprised me was the kind of people who repeated this. You expect, sort of people who spend their lives on Twitter to have this store of malice that they're constantly returning to, but when it comes up in Parliament, as it did, I was just astonished. I thought our members of Parliament had better things to do than to spend their time gossiping on Twitter. It was, but there we are.
I mean, one of the things which people jumped on was your description of Islamophobia as a propaganda word. But would you defend that now? It's
absolutely.
Yeah.
It was invented by the Muslim Brotherhood in order to stop discussion of a major issue which we all are worried about. We're all worried about the extent to which Islam condones or does not condone the violence committed in its name. I'm not. I think Douglas Murray has written quite well about this, and I have a PhD student who you probably know, Ed Hussein.
Yes.
Who's sort of very much concerned with getting from the Islamic tradition the other side to this question, what it is that Muslims really say and can say about the violent manifestations of their own faith, and that's what we have to do. We have to bring it into the open and discuss it, and this word is there to try and prevent that.
Yes. Do you think Islam is compatible with Western traditions and democracy?
Well, this is what Ed thinks ultimately, and possibly not. I mean, it would have to recognise that secular government takes precedence over religious obedience. And that is very hard. It was hard for us to recognise this, and it was only in the course of the 17th century that we actually got to do it. And I think Islam has to go through that process too, and whether it can is, I mean, meanwhile, of course, I entirely agree with what Ayan Hirsi Ali says, that there are two Islams. There's the Islam of Mecca, the original revelation, which gifted the Muslims with a peaceful way of life which was theirs, and which included them. And then there's the Islam of Medina, when the prophet had been forced into exile and was in fighting mood, and the Medina surahs of the Quran are just full of this anger and violence and need to impose things, and that's a different thing altogether. And I think the Muslims who settle into the Meccan way of life are obviously perfect citizens. They have the inner serenity that the citizen should have, and that's all. We ought to learn to appreciate that and encourage it.
And then on the other side, you're accused of anti-Semitism for your use of the term Soros Empire.
Is that what I did wrong? Yeah. Well, I was talking about Hungary at the time, wasn't I? And anybody who doesn't think that there's a Soros Empire in Hungary has not observed the facts.
Yes.
It's not necessarily an empire of Jews.
Yes.
I mean, that's such nonsense.
Yes.
How can one possibly deal with that?
Yes. Yes. What's your view of Orban? Do you think that he's misrepresented in the press?
To some extent, he is. I think I have a complex relation with Orban because I helped him set up his free university in Budapest in 1988, 1987, before the collapse of communism. When he was a young man, and he and his colleagues were doing a fantastic job. That's when they started Fidesz. And I told them at the time, you shouldn't make this into a youth party because you're not going to be young forever. You should make it into a constitutional conservative party of the old school. Then you've got a real tradition to build on. And that's what they did. But and it was all going pretty well. But I think power has gone to his head. And he has a huge charisma, and he's made some decisions which are very popular with the Hungarian people, because the Hungarians were extremely alarmed by the sudden invasion of huge tribes of Muslims from the Middle East, and you have to remember that their history of their relation with Islam is not a happy one. So, and he made those radical decisions that that we're going to exclude all this. We're going to maintain the security of our borders, come what may. And that's put him at loggerheads with the European Union. So he's got the whole propaganda machine to deal with. But I don't say that I agree with his policies in general. I think he's getting too close to Russia. But he's also being deliberately isolated by the European Union, which is not, in my view, a wise thing. It's the same problem as we had with the European Union. How do you negotiate something other than what's being dictated to you? Yes.
He is, of course, regularly accused of anti-Semitism.
Yeah, that's nonsense, though, in his case. I mean, I assume it's nonsense. The Hungarians, what I said in the speech that people quote from is true. I said that there's a legacy of anti-Semitism in Hungary which you can't deny. You have to recognise that if you're going to form any kind of coherent idea of what Hungary is as a nation. It has a large Jewish population who've got to be included. And this was one of the great strengths of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, that it gave to the Jews a sense of national identity as well as their ethnic and religious identity, and that was in danger of being lost because of the Nazi takeover and and then the communist takeover, which was also all part of that. So you should never ignore the possibility of anti-Semitism and the situation of the Jew in Hungary if you want to have a nation state. And I think Victor is aware of that. And he's done a lot, with Holocaust memorials and all that sort of stuff, to include Jews in his particular form of national politics. But it's not surprising that they don't necessarily want to be included.
Yes.
And it's not surprising if they join up with Soros's transnational campaign against Orban. So it's just such a complicated matter. All I would say is that there's no easy solution to this, but it's not the case that Orban is anti-Semitic. He is trying to find his own solution.
Yes.
And if you had a political movement in Hungary which excluded the Jews in some way, you'd be damn foolish, because they're the ones with the minds. And many of they've been as the Budapest intelligentsia. Many of them are Jewish, and they've inherited a long history of political thinking, which has been extremely useful to previous generations of Hungarians.
In the same way that Islamophobia is used to suppress debate, do you sometimes feel that the term anti-Semitism is used in the same way? That clearly there are Jews on the left who do try to exert influence through politics, and sometimes a normal critique of that is prevented through...
I think that's right. I think that a lot of the stuff about anti-Semitism in the Labour Party comes from this, that it's not necessarily anti-Semitic to be anti-Zionist. That there is an issue, of course, that the Labour Party has tried a lot of recruiting among inner city Muslim communities, which are often anti-Semitic, and so has suppressed all that. But yes, to get a clear, open debate on the left about anti-Semitism is as difficult as getting a debate on the right about Islamophobia. Yes.
What's your view of Donald Trump's presidency so far?
Oh God. Well, he hasn't fulfilled the expectations of the left of being a complete maniac.
Yes.
Who's presided over the collapse of America. He's pursued his little obsessions, like the wall and Mexican Wall and so on, in a relatively peaceful and provocative way. He's made some bold moves in foreign policy, like attempting to come to some conciliation with North Korea. Probably a mistake, because you're dealing with a totally paranoid state. But I don't know. I mean, in the Middle East, I'm not sure whether his policies have been... They're no different from Obama's, actually.
Yes.
And the domestic policy largely leaves things unchanged. I think that's basically that's what America is, because big policy changes occur through the Supreme Court, not through the presidency. So.
Do you see him as a conservative?
Well, no. I mean, like everybody else, I see him as a vulgar, half-educated oaf. But there's no reason why vulgar, half-educated oafs should not be represented in politics. And here is a chance for one of them to say that we're not as bad as you all think.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Were you optimistic when Theresa May became Prime Minister?
Definitely not. Because I think a Prime Minister should be elected. I think Cameron's resignation really was the death knell of the Conservative Party as we knew it, because that's not something that a proper Conservative politician can do, renounce leadership at the moment when it's needed. And so it was handed on to her as second best from Andrea Leadsom or someone like that. I can't remember what.
Yes, it was Leadsom. Yes.
Yeah. and there was all the scandal around Boris. And it's anyway. I can't say that Theresa May would have been my choice.
What do you see as her flaws?
Well, not sure what I really want to accuse her of any flaws. I think she's a very, obviously an honest, respectable, old-fashioned, somewhat wooden person who's been given a role which she probably would not have acquired in any other way, and she's doing her best. But it's not what the country needs. What
does the country need?
Well, it does need strong leadership. Someone who says, look, this is how it's going to be, and I'm going to take the cost of it. Let it be on my shoulders.
Yes.
And I'm going to do it.
Yes. Someone with the courage prepared, for instance, to accept a no-deal Brexit.
A Churchill-type figure is what is needed. And there aren't many of those around.
Is Boris Johnson potentially one?
Well, it's interesting that he obviously imagines he is.
Yes.
But I think, there's the buffoonery and all that we have to deal with.
Is there anyone else you see in the wings as a potential leader?
I don't know. Not really. Not at the moment. But I'm not. I'm not. I'm not a political being. Really,
yes.
So,
what do you think of Sajid Javid?
He seems to be very honest, dealing with difficult situations reasonably well. I think. Nothing special, but nothing.
Yes.
But he's very much in the tradition of Home Secretaries.
Philosophically, he's quite interesting because I know he was very interested in libertarian thought and Ayn Rand.
That's right. A lot of people come into conservatism through that route, and because she made of libertarianism, she combined the libertarian economics with the sort of Nietzschean politics. This is the self-affirmation of the self-made man, and that is very appealing to somebody who's coming in to politics from outside.
Yes,
saying yes, I can do it.
Do you think the Conservative Party has been somewhat deformed by libertarianism, though?
Well, it benefited from it too. It with Keith Joseph and all that it gave it a kind of economic strength at a certain stage. It's not the whole truth, but it's part of the truth, I guess.
When you said Cameron's resignation sounded the death knell for the Conservatives, you seem pessimistic about their future.
No, for the old Conservative Party, it has to remake itself.
Yes.
It can't just go along in the old way. I don't see Labour as an alternative, not at the moment, because it is. Well, we all know the difficulties with the leadership problem that it has. No, it would be nice to have a humane Labour Party, properly led, humane and patriotic. That's the thing, that the Labour Party had always aimed, the Attlee Labour Party aimed to be that. To have that as the opposition would help enormously.
Do you think it's possible that Jeremy Corbyn could become Prime Minister?
Well, I think it's unlikely. I just can't see people voting for him.
Yes.
But you never know. It's again, I'm not really into all that sort of thing.
Yes. If Corbyn did become Prime Minister, and obviously he would be perhaps the most left-wing Prime Minister that the UK's ever had.
He would.
Would you consider emigration at that point?
I'm too old. No, I think I would become quite active politically if my energy permits. I don't think it. We have to see what he would do, because you can't just do things in this country. You can say things, but you know, there's huge weight of institutional facts that you have to get together with.
And beyond politics, how do you feel about humanity's future?
Oh gosh. I mean, you're talking about all the transhumanist stuff and all that.
Well, partly that, but when you look at the various forces changing the world, are you an optimist or a pessimist?
I've never been an optimist.
Yes.
But that's fine because, pessimists have the possibility of being agreeably surprised, and that's the reason for being pessimistic. But I've always defended a certain kind of pessimism because I think that what is known as optimism is really a collection of illusions. I think one must recognise what all religious people know, which is that human beings are imperfect and fallen, and there's no way in which they can alone surmount the problems which they themselves create. I think we are in a difficult. There are difficulties round the corner that we are ignoring, like the rise of China. And there's something quite frightening about the Chinese sort of mass politics and the regimentation of the ordinary being. I think that and we invent robots, and they are that. In a sense, they are creating robots out of their own people by so constraining what can be done that that each Chinese person is a kind of replica of the next one, and that's a very frightening thing.
Yes.
Maybe I don't know enough about it to be confident in making that judgment, but the politics is like that, and the foreign policy is like that, and the concentration camps have come back, largely there to re-educate the Muslims and so on. But yeah.
I suppose when we look outside, we're seeing the resurgence of knife crime, for instance.
All that, yeah. That's a bit like the transgender thing. It's a kind of hysterical imitation of each other. These are local psychical diseases which erupt, have their day and go. We've had this in America, and I suspect it's not the big thing, and it's a fashion among young men. Young men have obviously have the genetic need to affirm their identity, and violently if necessary, because that's the way of proving yourself in the gang. There's all sorts of basic hunter-gatherer instincts at stake here, and we have to be, to some extent, understanding of that. The school system has let them down. They're brought up in grim areas that we ourselves have created in our cities. Which is one of the things that I'm supposed to be working on: how to cure us of all that ugliness.
Some conservatives would say it's knife crime is really a black problem and linked to the decline of stop and search.
Well, we don't know. We haven't got the statistics, and the statistics will presumably be carefully guarded secret.
Yes.
To some extent, though, it's certainly proving yourself in the gang. I don't say it's something that is special to black people, but it can be special to a certain kind of isolated immigrant community. And as in West Side Story, it's part of the human condition that when you're put in that isolated situation, one community within another, and you haven't got any means of proving yourself in the larger community outside, you've got to prove yourself here and now in the gang. And I think that is certainly a dynamic of the situation.
Yes. Okay, I think that about covers it, so thank you.
Thank you.